don't we start our afternoon program as people continue to filter in from lunch. Our next panel is Spotlight on Alternatives, Sharing Success Stories. So let me introduce our moderator, who will then introduce our panel. If I summarize all of Doug Berman's accomplishments in the sentencing arena, we will run out of time for this panel, literally. So I will give you the highlights. Doug is the Newton Baker and Hostetler Chair in Law and Executive Director of the Drug Enforcement and Policy Center at the Moritz College of Law at Ohio State University. That's a mouthful. He's taught numerous courses in the criminal law arena, written 2 case books on sentencing law and policy, has testified before Congress and sentencing commissions throughout the country, has served as the editor of the Federal Sentencing Reporter for over 25 years. He is the creator and author of the widely read and viewed Sentencing Law and Policy blog, and he's worked often on a pro bono basis with lawyers all over the country, myself included. I've had that privilege, on a variety of high-profile, cutting-edge sentencing cases. If you have an important, novel, or tricky sentencing issue, you want Doug Berman on your speed dial. Doug, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction, and I'm going to be very quick in introducing because I'm just extraordinarily honored and pleased to be able to moderate this panel where we're going to be talking about success stories. I think about what we see on the news. There's that old phrase in the news business, if it bleeds, it leads. And that really is a marker of what we see, especially when it comes to sort of the way the public frames criminal justice policy. They're constantly reminded, and often the second line after we hear about some misdeed is, the offender had this criminal history or was on release for this or that. And so that creates this impression that the classic story is somebody who wasn't incarcerated enough. And we don't hear the images of people going to work, people raising their families, people otherwise being terrific members of their own community, with the tagline, I can't come up with something as clever, if it bleeds, it leads, right? If it's an alternative, it's probably working, right? Which, you can see why I'm not a copywriter. And so, but those are the stories that we want to get out, and we're extraordinarily lucky to have kind of 3 pairs, or really one's a trio of individuals to sort of talk about their experiences, where we're seeing both the individual who took advantage of being offered an alternative to incarceration and the justice system actor who was central and integral to making that happen. And you can see their sort of bios in short form on the slide, and I'm just going to go right into introducing them and encouraging them to spend about 5 minutes sort of telling their story, and then hopefully we'll have lots of time for question at the end, because I saw from the earlier panels there were lots of folks in the audience that had very important and valuable things to say, and with this real community of experience, I think it would be so valuable to hear comments and reactions to what they're going to tell us in the next hour. And so with that, our first pairing is Richard Fox and Judge Quatrara, and I think we've decided that Richard would go first to kind of tell his background, how he got brought into the justice system, and then how the alternative played out, and then the judge will follow that up.
Sure. Thank you guys for having me today. I'm really happy to speak about my experiences on an alternative sentencing docket, and kind of how my life got to that point where I needed one, and how my life has thrived and benefited while being on one and since completing it. My whole life, about 30 years, I was never in trouble for anything more than a traffic ticket. I had run for political office. I was a House of Delegates candidate for Virginia. I raised a family, had a beautiful wife, a wonderful son, and I was also diagnosed with being bipolar. And for many years, while bipolar, certainly would flare up and affect my day-to-day life, it never really affected it to anything of any real substance until the fall of 2020. Actually, pretty much 3 years ago to the date today, I was arrested. And, I can get more into detail about my mental health, my mental illness, and how it affected me. But long story short, I was faced with, I was looking at multiple charges in multiple jurisdictions, and I was fortunate enough that Albemarle County, that the county that I live in, had what they call the therapeutic docket. And the therapeutic docket allowed me to, still be a father, still be a husband, still continue to work while recognizing I had certain needs with my mental health. And, there were so many, barriers that we had to meet, and so many kind of rules to follow. This definitely wasn't an easy get out of jail free card. In fact, honestly, although it may have killed me, it probably would have been easier just to sit in a jail cell. I had to be accountable. I had group meetings weekly. I had meetings with the Office of Aid and Restoration Officers. We had court at least twice a month early on, where I had to sit with Judge Quatrara and all the other members of the therapeutic docket. And over the course of time, being on the docket, I was introduced to tools and skill sets that helped me not only recognize, what I had done and to be a better individual and to deal with my crime and my convictions, but also how to better manage my mental illness. Without that component alone, this docket saved my life just in teaching me that. And having a judge who was willing to work with everybody on the docket. We had a broad range of participants with a broad range of issues and reasons why we had all been brought there. And Judge Quatrara listened to every single one of us, and he would put together whatever individuals needed to succeed. And it wasn't always easy. I know I didn't, I wasn't the best participant 100% of the time. I didn't have the easiest go of it, at least at first. And it's definitely something early on. I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is an alternative to jail. Let me just get on it and see where it goes. And over the course of it, I became, as Judge Quatrara calls it, a true believer in the docket and how it can help people and how it can help our community. And since getting off the docket, I kind of make it my life mission to do whatever I can to bring awareness to alternative sentencing dockets across the Commonwealth of Virginia, across federally. Listening to many of the speakers at the summit, it's been great hearing the progress that has been done and listening to many of the judges. Their views and their mindsets have changed over time, but the work is just beginning. We all have to get together. We all have to listen to everybody up here and listen to all of the speakers today, and we have to go back, listen to the speakers tomorrow, but when we go back, we have to keep working. Work is far from done. Too many people are slipping through the cracks. Too many people with mental health issues, unfortunately, are not getting the care that they need to succeed and to be better members of society and to live their life. And I'm grateful. The therapy docket saved my life, and I know it saved countless others. And I'll kind of leave it at that, but again, happy to answer any questions you guys have and explain more about my situation if anybody would like.
Thank you so much for sharing. I probably have one or two follow-ups, but first we'll hear from Judge Quatrara.
All right, so Richard said it better than I will try to, which makes sense because he's the one that did all the work. When I met Richard, I had no idea about his political aspirations. Richard came to me as a stack of charges, and had Richard not been able to avail himself of our program, both in our jurisdiction and in a couple of other jurisdictions, this was not a circumstance where it would have been an easy ride for him from a criminal justice standpoint. Not that it was an easy ride having to come hang out with me twice a month, but he was going to prison if it weren't for this alternative. It took and it takes a willingness to take risks on people to have a successful program like a therapeutic docket. Our docket in Albemarle County, which is the county that surrounds Charlottesville. I've got the folks that are in Charlottesville and Albemarle County on our docket. We were started in 2018. My predecessor, Judge Robert Downer, was the one who petitioned the Virginia Supreme Court to initiate it. I inherited it when he retired in June of 2019. During that time period, we've had 174 participants, 54 graduates like this man. When the therapeutic docket participants come to us, they come to us with two things: serious mental illness and criminal charges, those two things. And they oftentimes will come to us we have a 5-phase program, but realistically it's 3 phases. They come first as hostages. They come, that's a Mike Tomlinism. He likes to talk in football terms. As you know, he's a football coach for the Steelers, and he doesn't want hostages. Oftentimes the participants will come to us as hostages. They don't see this as anything other than a way to cut down a sentence, avoid a conviction, whatever the case may be. Richard was a little bit that way in the start. He was looking for a way to soften the blow, so to speak. As they continue along in the docket, they become volunteers or tourists, where they start to buy into what is going on when they meet with probation, when they attend moral recognition therapy, when they are visiting with their mental health counselor, when they're doing medication management appointments, all as a condition of success in the docket. And then the ultimate goal, obviously, is to have them become true believers like Richard was. Richard and I were not always the best of buddies during the time period that he was in that hostage/tourist phase, but by the time he got to the true believer phase, it was abundantly clear that he was going to be eminently successful, and that's a tribute not to anybody else but him and the work that he put in. I think it takes a willingness to take risks, as I said, on people. In Charlottesville and Albemarle County, I sometimes will say that we have a case of the century every couple of years. When you think about some of the serious offenses that we've had in our community, 100 miles southwest of here, we've had the UVA lacrosse case. We had the abductions of the Virginia Tech and the UVA student that were the subject of the 2-hour season premiere of Dateline NBC. We've had the recent and still pending, so I won't go beyond to talk beyond talking about it, the alleged shooting events that took place with our football team at the University of Virginia. We are not some bucolic bubble that's immune from the stresses and strains of the regular criminal justice system, but you've got to be willing to take the risks if you want to be able to do that. That includes prosecutors, that includes judges, and at some level it includes defense attorneys who might say, gee, I don't know if this is something that I'm going to be able to advocate for my client, something along those lines. You've got to be willing, as the judge especially, to learn. There is nothing in law school that taught me about the difference between Seroquel and gabapentin. I had no idea what that meant in June of 2019. But you've got to be willing to not be so focused on just the law and be willing to attend some classes. The first class I took, when I took over the docket, I had an individual in front of me, you'll remember it because you were there, who had suicidal ideations literally sitting in the chair in front of me while I was talking to him about how things were going. And I thought to myself, I've got to get smarter at this or I'm going to mess this up and it's going to cost somebody big time. So I took a class called Mental Health First Aid. Anybody taken Mental Health First Aid? Awesome class. If you get a chance to take it, it's a great class. Highly recommend it. And then the third thing you have to do is you have to be willing to redefine success sometimes. I said we've had 174 participants, 54 graduates. Does that mean that the other 120 human beings that were enrolled in our program are failures? Absolutely not. For some of them, taking the step to acknowledge that they've got a mental illness issue and taking the step to go and see a therapist, to go on medication, to go interact with a probation officer on a consistent basis, whether they successfully graduate from the program or not, is a monumental success, and it's to be celebrated. So how we define success is very important with respect to those things. I believe that the therapeutic docket that we're fortunate enough to have, that Judge Downer was so brave in laying the foundation on, is, and I understand, I get it, there's judges in the room, all our cases are important, every single one of them is important. But this work that we do in this sphere, in this space, I think is the most important work that I personally am doing right now. And I'm grateful to have people like Richard who are willing to go to the mat and give it a shot, come out on the other end successfully. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those stories. And I just one quick follow-up question. Want to get to our other speakers as well, but in terms of how mental illness gets identified and dealt with through the alternative programming system, it sounded like you had been diagnosed bipolar before coming into the justice system. Is that critical? Is that a key element to helping a program like yours work, that people have been already diagnosed, or at least there's an ability maybe for a defendant or a defense attorney to talk about those issues ahead of time? Or do you have tools? Obviously, taking the training you were describing is a huge part of that, but undiagnosed mental illness is such a huge problem in our society, not just in the criminal justice system, but throughout our justice systems. Speak to just sort of how do you mediate those challenges?
My guess would be that the majority of participants are folks that are undiagnosed when they come into the program, because as part of the evaluation process to be admitted to the program, you have to be evaluated from a mental health standpoint. And I think for a lot of the folks who maybe aren't connected with resources organically before they come into the system, this is their real first opportunity to figure out what's going on in their head. So I would say that Richard's case is the minority in terms of the diagnosis along the timeline. And so it helps to have, and you can't do a program like this without, in Virginia, what we have are community services boards, which is community-based mental health care. We have a dedicated therapist that assists us with our evaluation process and is there for every step of the way from the docket. It can't work without their input.
Yeah, it's such a key theme that I think we'll keep hearing about is education, resources, and understanding so critical to making these programs work. And so thank you so much for sharing all that. We'll now turn to Destiny Garcia and Todd Olsen about their experiences, and I want to make sure they have time to talk. So go ahead. I think you can just kick it off.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Sorry. First of all, thank you. I'm absolutely gobsmacked to be in this room with you fine people because so many people here are doing so many important, amazing things, and I'm just an idiot who they haven't fired yet. I wandered into the DA's office about 15 years ago, and they were kind enough to hire me. And right away, I realized that the cases I cared about, the cases that I wanted to spend my time on, were not the ones that other people cared about, not the ones that ended up on the news, not the ones that ended up with the tearful story. I wanted to work on the cases of people who were in trouble, but who could find their way out of it, and right away that meant working on drug court. I'm also a little surprised to be here because for me, I've grown up as a lawyer in a jurisdiction where alternative sentencing, alternative processes are the norm. We've had a drug court in Salt Lake County since 1997. It's never been a particularly controversial thing. We've had Republican district attorneys, we've had Democratic district attorneys, and drug court is just a baked-in part of the system in Salt Lake County. And a lot of people are surprised to hear how big our program currently is. There are about 75 prosecutors in the district attorney's office. We're going to file about 13,000 cases this year, and myself and two other lawyers will resolve probably 12% of those cases, just between the three of us. We currently have about 500 people in our drug court program. We have about 100 people in our mental health court program, about 40 in our veterans court program, and we have a pre-adjudication diversion program, which is anywhere between 200 and 300 people at any given minute. So even just the work my team does, we have about 1,200 cases that never go to prelim, right? For whom we never have to subpoena witnesses, for whom officers don't have to take time off to come to court and testify. We have dramatically cut down on the costs. It costs about $85 a day to house someone just in the basic unit at the Salt Lake County Jail. Drug court costs about $15 to $20 per person per day, so it's incredible cost savings for the county. And we're very fortunate in Salt Lake County to be aggressively pursuing new and alternative programs. We, as I mentioned, our diversion program, we started our diversion program officially in 2019, right before the pandemic hit. And so we've very much been trying to keep things growing. We target low risk offenders, low to moderate risk offenders, and try and identify as many people pre-filing as we can or post-filing when possible, and scoop them up and get them out of the system as quickly as possible, which is, I think everyone agrees, is the goal of something like the diversion program. So that's a little bit about our jurisdiction. But in 2017, we had something loftily called Operation Rio Grande, which is that the area around the homeless shelter in Salt Lake City at that time was near the Rio Grande train station, and it had become a sort of an open-air drug market. It was not a safe place. It was not a good place to be. And after a while, enough political will was gathered to do this big, heavy-handed Operation Rio Grande, ORG, where we police officers descended en masse and swept up a bunch of people. And there's all kinds of debate about whether that was the correct trauma-informed way to handle it, but it did happen, and it resulted in the creation of, we went from 3 drug court judges to a 4th drug court judge provided by the funding for that program, which is where we first met Destiny Garcia, who I will pass the time off to.
Thanks, Todd. I thought you were going to say more nicer things about me. My name is Destiny Garcia. I am a woman in long-term recovery. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I grew up, a little about my journey and where I am now. Growing up in my family, running from the law was normal. Violence was normal. Running away from all your problems were normal. So as I grew up and became an adult, I found myself in a very violent relationship. And when I left that relationship at the age of 32, I left with a really large opiate problem. I was going to emergency rooms often for injuries and being prescribed opiates for those legitimate injuries like broken noses, fractured eye sockets from my violent relationship. When I decided I wanted to stay alive, I decided I was going to be homeless. It was either I was going to stay in the relationship and die, or I was going to be homeless and try to live. I went to the streets of Salt Lake County, extremely addicted, lost my children in the process, and I would cycle in and out of jail. And that's what my family knew. My brothers are still in prison to this day. It's what my dad was in prison. We go in and out, in and out, in and out. It's all my family knows. I got tired of going in and out, in and out. But I had a bunch of misdemeanor charges, and I would always get booked and released. I would be extremely sick from IV use, and I would still just get booked and released on my charges until Operation Rio Grande came. With Operation Rio Grande came a whole bunch of funding. Now, there's a lot of controversy on if this operation criminalized homelessness and things of that nature, but for me, it gave me the tools I needed to save my own life. Through that operation, I was able to get funding, and I was no longer cycling in and out of the jail system. And I had a choice to make. It was either go into the drug court program or run. And I have always ran. So this time I decided to do something a little different. After I tried to opt out and they wouldn't let me. I tried to opt out and they wouldn't let me, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. So with conjunction of drug court and going into an inpatient treatment program and the support of my family rallying behind me, I decided that I was going to do it. And let me remind you, I always ran. The first time I appeared in front of a judge was at the drug court program, and I had 16 warrants when I got arrested because I never went to court. I always ran. But the difference with the drug court program was I walked in there and I felt, they asked me, what do you need to succeed? They treated me like a human. They praised me for having sober time. And I'm friends with my prosecutor. My family, with the family I come from, they're like, you're friends with your prosecutor? I'm like, yeah. Me and my prosecutor are going on a trip and flying together. But because of that operation, I was given an opportunity after that to work in the Salt Lake County Mayor's office. I had this extensive criminal background and nobody would give me a job. I was afforded that opportunity because of how hard I worked throughout that program. And because somebody gave me a job with decent pay, with medical benefits, I was able to rebuild my life from homelessness. I was able to get my own apartment, which my adult son had to sign for. And when I was filling out these housing applications, I was putting down the mayor of the county as a reference. Nobody called him. They didn't believe me. Nobody called them because they looked at my criminal history and was like, we're not going to give her an apartment. I ended up getting the apartment, but the moral of my story is that within 5 years, because I was given the opportunities I was given, I worked extremely hard. I learned the tools I needed through the drug court program. I went from homelessness to home ownership in 5 years. That is huge. Thank you. I know a lot of people who have not been through what I've been through and still can't buy a home these days. I've worked extremely hard, and I owe it to the drug court program. I go back and give back to them as much as I can. I speak in their drug court graduations. I'm there at almost every drug court. It's one of the favorite places I like to be. Today, I'm the executive director of Clean Slate Utah, so I help people clear their criminal records and access opportunities. I have learned that being vulnerable and sharing my story with this loud mouth that used to get me arrested. My mom told me all growing up, that mouth of yours, man, it's going to get you in trouble. And it did. It did for a lot of years. But I get to go nationwide now and share my story of recovery, being raw, being vulnerable, what it looks like, and what I get to do now. And what I get to do now is serve the population that I got arrested with, serve the population that my family is still ingrained in, and help people go from homelessness to recovery if that's what they want. I think I better stop. I will go on and on and on and on.
It's wonderful hearing your story, and both those comments highlighted for me in so many ways how culture and connections are so central to what we're doing here. Whether it's the culture of the court system, the DA's office, to be doing this kind of work, and the connections that get built between justice system individuals and those they're there to serve, however you want to define that, and then also obviously the culture of people's backgrounds and how that shapes how they come into the justice system. And if we don't meet people where they are, we're not going to have success. And it sounds like this is one of the success stories that we're here to hear about. And so with that, I'll now turn and thank those folks for keeping it short, because we could talk about any of these stories for days and days. But now we get the good fortune to have Rob Capers, who, if I had to introduce everything that he's done in the justice system, we'd be here for days and days. But I will just kick it to him to sort of MC hearing from our other participants here, and I'll even let you introduce them so I don't steal your thunder.
Thanks so much. So my name is Rob Capers. Currently, I'm the Chief Probation Officer for the Eastern District of... Currently, I'm the Chief Probation Officer for the Eastern District of New York. And I want to introduce two folks to my left. This is Anderson Taveras. He is a young man who I met almost 7 years ago now. And that was the last time I saw him. And at that point, he was a participant in our pretrial, our sister office, the Pretrial Services Office's Special Options Services Program. To my far left is Amina Adossa-Ali. She's my very good friend, a 20-year friend. She is a senior pretrial services officer and has been with the Eastern District of New York for 20 years? 23 years. And so I met Amina 20 years ago when I started as a rookie at USA, and we were in magistrate court together and kind of bonded from there. And as you'll hear the story bear out, through the work of the SOS program and the hard work of this young man, we sit here today with him as a resounding success story. And so, I just want to start very quickly. Can you tell us briefly about the SOS program?
Okay, so the SOS program is a young adult program that we run in the Eastern District of New York. We are one of the few young adult programs, and I believe we are the only program that does not get any upfront decisions from the U.S. Attorney's Office or from Defense Counsel about who enters the program. When the program became court involved, the 4 judges, because we also have a drug court program, the POP program, the 4 judges who were involved, they said that we want the right people in this program. So if we get buy-in from the U.S. Attorney's Office, they're going to want cooperators, and they're going to want, people who are going to be successful. And then, defense counsel are going to want people in here who are going to breeze through the program. And, the right people are not going to get into the program. So they charge the Pretrial Services Agency with being the sole person who decides who gets in and out of the program. So, and this is important because the relationship between, myself and Mr. Capers here had a big, was a big part of Anderson having his opportunity. So we take the people who have high need. We want those who most people think they're not gonna be successful under supervision. So 18 to 24-year-olds who lack education, who lack job skills, who have homelessness, who have mental health issues, who have sexual abuse problems, like whatever the issue is, that's who we want. We want the people who need our help. I wish that I could take every 18 to 24-year-old who, this might be their first offense and just a bad mistake. But if you're already in college and you already have a solid foundation and you're doing okay, then this program is not for you, because this is intensive supervision, and we need to work with the population who needs intensive supervision. So
with that as a backdrop, I want to introduce Anderson Taveras. He's going to tell you, first of all, his story.
From my side.
From his side. and when you hear the story, you'll understand why he was the perfect fit for this program.
Yeah, it's been interesting. As Rob mentioned earlier, I got my dismissal and then I disappeared for 7 years. So I've got the opportunity to catch up with both of them, and it's been very interesting. But I want to talk about my... Closer? Okay. Sorry, my voice doesn't project, so I'll probably have to... All right, so I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic, and I was given into custody to my grandparents when I was very young because my mom had gotten arrested. And then at the age of 13, my father decided to bring me here. And a few of the things that I got from growing up with my grandparents was that my granddad used to take me to work with him in the lands every day. And my grandma used to take me to church every morning at 5 a.m. So from my granddad, I learned how to work hard. And from my grandmother, I learned how to be very, very, very respectful. Coming to the U.S., not knowing English, different culture, it was very hard for me to get adjusted. And I ended up clashing a lot with my father and my stepmom at the time. So at the age of 17 and 2 months, I couldn't take it anymore. So I literally grabbed my luggage in the middle of the night and jumped out of the second floor. But I made sure to throw the luggage first for a soft landing. And ran away from my house. That was my first bad decision that I made, which at the time I thought it was good. I used to cut hair. I used to work at a barber shop, and I was also going to high school at the time. But I had to make a decision, which was either stop going to school or stop working and going back to my dad. Going back to my dad was not an option for me, so I decided to drop out of high school. Fast forward a few years later, I started hanging out with one of my cousins, and he introduced me to a whole bunch of people that had so many nice things that I wanted. And I got involved into a drug ring, whatever. And then I got arrested. Luckily, I got arrested because at the speed that I was going at the time, I was either going to end up dead or option A, or B, which was getting arrested. After a couple of months in basically maximum security for my first offense, after being caught by the feds, I got a chance to get into pretrial, where I used to meet with an officer every week, and he used to tell me like, "Hey, after speaking with me a few times, he used to tell me that I have potential, and I'm always joking around." So I was like, "Yes, you don't know how many hours spent sleeping." That's my potential. And then he started, telling me to start taking things serious, and he was going to introduce me to Miss Ali so I can, try to get into the SOS program. They never told me that I was going to be free or that my charges were going to be dropped, But they did say that if I do good enough in the program, I might do less time. And with the way that I used to do things, I was very comfortable in my little shell. So I was like, all right, I'll find a way to do the minimum and, get a lesser sentence, and then I'll see how I do when I get out. But I was expecting all the changes that were going to come by joining the program. And to me, it was a big surprise. I started working with Amina, and at the beginning, I was very hard-headed, but it was just the way that I grew up. In my house, as I mentioned at the beginning, my grandfather didn't go to school at all. My grandma never went to school at all. When I came here to live with my dad, it was more about working at the grocery store that he owned than, helping me with my homework, guiding me through a right path or anything like that. So it was just me by myself. I didn't get along with my stepmom, so I'm not even going to start talking about it. But I didn't have any role models in my life or anything to follow that would teach me how to be a better man or how to be anybody in life. So as soon as I found something that was eye-catching, movie style type of stuff, I went for that. And that's what got me in trouble. Meeting Amina changed my life. Took me a long time to get adjusted to doing the things that she wanted me to do because I always wanted to do them my way. But when my way didn't work out, first she started extending my curfew. And then she started providing me with incentive after I started doing something right, which was giving me more time to spend outside with my friends and stuff like that. Although I started cutting them out after a while. Then I started following her instructions step by step. I wanted to cut hair. She allowed me to do that after I got out of jail. It didn't work out. She was like, hey, you need to get your GED. I was like, whatever. And then I bought a book like this big, and she was like, that's not going to work. I had to sign up for some classes. I went and signed up for some classes. And then she wanted me to learn skills, to get other skills, soft skills that I didn't have. One of them was speaking. I used to hate speaking. My English, although still not so good today, it was even worse before. So, she provided me with all the tools that I needed in order for me to become a better man, a better professional. Sent me to programs to help me get the skills that I needed to be able to get a job, wake up on time. And then I got my GED. I went to college because of her. And
Because of you?
I graduated college becoming the first person from my family, my little circle of the family, to graduate college. And I became a role model for the generation following behind me, which are all my little cousins. To make the story shorter, it's very long. I think I need another hour or two to go over everything. But I took it personal. And at some point, there were so many doors opening with everything that Amina was doing for me. At some point, I thought I was depressed. She convinced me to go to therapy because I didn't believe in that. My family, where I'm from, they don't believe in that. So I thought I was going crazy. And it turned out that because of all the changes that I was making in my life, I didn't know how to handle that. And they showed me how to work through that. If I didn't have the chance to join this program, I don't even know where I would be today. But I'm a house owner. I have a beautiful family. So this gift gave me the opportunity to spend every day with my daughter, which, I was looking to at least miss the first 3 years of our life. But I got the opportunity because of Mr. Rob. So I appreciate what he did for me.
If you'll allow me, there's just a couple of other points. You were in this program for 5 years, yes, right? And one of the points is that there's no artificial timeline for this. Is that right, Amina?
That is correct.
Okay. So tell us what you did with him over those 5 years.
I mean, I think in some of these programs, they focus on the masses, right? One size fits all, but with especially the young adult population, but I think with all of these, justice involved people, you have to get to know the person right there and help them figure out, because they don't always know what it is that they want to do. And it's our jobs to help them see their own potential. So, I can't, help somebody fully adult in 12 months or 18 months. Most people here probably went to college and it took at least 4 years. But, in the justice system, the clock is moving and, people want cases off, their caseload. And so, that's one of the biggest criticisms that, people are in this program for too long. But again, when it comes to adulting, you can't have someone who has no education and no skills and then expect them to go out in the world and, do great things. So, we had to start from education. We had to start from structure. I've heard a lot of negative things about the ankle bracelet, but for Anderson, it taught him a lot of responsibility, because if he had to go to a program, I could look and see that he left on time, and if he didn't, then his curfew, instead of being 8 o'clock, would be down to 5, and then he learned how to get up on time, so, and then if he did great things, then his curfew would be, extended. So we used that like behavior modification. It wasn't like a home incarceration situation. There would be some lockdown times if things didn't go well. But this is about the marathon, not about a race. You have to invest the time into these individuals for them to be the success stories that they are.
And so to set the stage for when you approached me 5 years later, this young man having pled guilty to conspiracy to distribute a kilo or more of heroin. So for federal practitioners, that's a 10-year count. He had already admitted it. And Amina, I was a newly minted U.S. attorney. I'd probably been U.S. attorney for about 9 months or so. And Amina approaches me, and her judges that she worked with knew that Amina was the person to approach me because of the years of trust that we had working with each other. And she asked me to do something extraordinary, which is, in the face of all of that, to give him an outright dismissal because of all the good work that he had done. And we all recognize that it's the felony that's the gift that keeps on giving for eternity for these folks. And so, Amina, tell them about that story, please.
He said, would you bet a year's salary? Would you bet a year's salary on this young man? And I'm like, damn, a full year? And I said, yeah, this is, one person that if I had to put my career on the line, that I think, this is a worthwhile candidate.
And that's because she knew him. Because what Amina is not saying is she takes these folks on and they become her kids. She is on them 24/7, making sure they're doing the things that they're supposed to do, right? And so she not only said that she would risk a year's salary, but she said, but don't let me be the judge, you come for yourself. And I came to the court and observed the program and how it worked. I talked to people in the program. I pulled this young man to the side and scared the hell out of him because I'm almost twice the size of him. And I leaned in on him and said, you're asking me to do something extraordinary and take the chance. And in his own way, he explained to me that he was worth it. And I did that under the backdrop of a lot of protests within the office because our Central Islip office, where this indictment originated, was not keen on giving anybody a pass. And I had to look at him, pray about him, and decide that I trust my friend and her judgment. I trust the work that she does in the program, that he is worth the chance. And I dismissed that indictment. And in those 7 years, this man has done everything from run facilities to self-teach himself IT work, and he now works as an IT manager for a company, and tells me that he wants to do something else before it's all over with.
So I wanted to do a full circle. So when I got out, I just packed my stuff and got my papers and left the courtroom. But I had a plan for my life, a plan that I want to fulfill, which I've followed step by step up to this day. I disappeared because I wanted to reach out to him when I was either working at court, doing something in court, or I own my own business, which is something that I'm planning to do next year, hopefully. So I do have plans, and those plans, actually, the way that I implement my plans in life is stuff that I learned from Amina. So I still live my life today as if I was in the program, but with the incentive that I'm free and I can do whatever I want.
Thank you for telling those terrific stories, and I think in some respects we came full circle to what Judge Quatrara was talking about in terms of taking risks. One general question I have for the group, and then I'll open it up to the audience, is, one level of obvious risk-taking is taking a risk on the individual who's been brought into the justice system and hoping they can take advantage of the opportunity for an alternative disposition and get their life turned around. But is there also a challenge, especially for the justice system participants, of taking a risk of just doing something different? That is what Rob Capers was talking about in terms of just what his office mates were kind of looking at him for. And I also, hearing everybody discuss just how much work is involved, right? And I worry at times that that's one of the real barriers. It may not even be being unwilling to take a risk on individuals, but being unwilling to take a risk on the amount of work, the amount of energy, the amount of alternatives that, I especially know teaching in a law school, I didn't go to law school for this, right? I went to law school to do the law, not to learn about gabapentin, right? That's what the doctors are there for. And so I wonder if, and this can be for the participants in the programs as well, is if you sort of get a feel for the challenge is not just risk-taking on individuals to try an alternative, but for a system that's built around a certain way of doing things where there are all these barriers to taking the steps that are obviously needed to make these kinds of programs work.
So I think that the most important thing that you have to do is and if there are folks who are 1990s self-help aficionados, the Stephen Covey books begin with the end in mind. Big picture, what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to do here as a system? Is the end goal a press release, or is the end goal a circumstance where the community is safer and the person who's in justice involved is treated fairly? What are we trying to do here? Is the outcome how much time a person spends, or who they are at the end of that time? The conversation that I had recently with a gentleman who's been in 4 years, probably been in front of me 10 times. He popped up on video again, and I looked at him and I said, "Look, man, here's the deal." I said, I don't know what your thought process is about drug court or therapeutic docket. You need to talk to your lawyer about that, and they're going to need to talk to the prosecutor about that, and maybe they'll present that to me, maybe they won't. But this whole thing of you being here like 10 times in 4 years, that's not working for either of us. And he looked at me and he's like, "Yeah, you're right." I'm like, "This isn't working, dude. So let's think of something else. Here's 2 alternatives. I'm going to throw these out to you. Maybe they'll fit, but this right here is just not working." And hopefully I'll get to see that gentleman in some sort of alternative capacity soon.
Well, there are absolutely risks with trying new things. My boss is an elected official, so he bears that more than I do. But for example, when we started our Veterans Court program, we had some successes, some failures, but we had this one gentleman who was just a rock star who, we could all point to and say, "This is the guy, this is the one who's going to do great things." Was on the fast track to graduation, And then one weekend, he went home and killed his entire family. And just no one saw it coming. You know, we have a brand new Veterans Court program where we were taking people who had, you know, fairly serious charges, and now we had someone who, instead of going to prison, was able to kill, you know, his whole family. And that my boss wrestled with that quite a bit as to the future of Veterans Court. Is this something we can keep doing? Is this something we should keep doing? But in the end, he decided that, you know, he was going to be honest about it. He was going to be accountable to the community about it. And in the end, I think, you know, people understood that we can't protect everyone from everything. And some terrible things will happen, but the good that we can do outweighs the risk.
I think that's right. I mean, is there a fear of trying something new or doing or taking a risk? It is, but when you have rewards like the person sitting to my left and this lady sitting to my right, that lets you know that it's worth, you know, taking a chance. Look, it's about changing the paradigm and looking at what really justice is. And when we start looking at the reasons why people do what they do and how can we as a system help them to achieve those things that they need so that they can live a law-abiding life, and you have examples of it. That's what, I guess, guards against fear, anxiety, and frankly, fatigue at the idea of alternative programs, either on the front end or the back end. Amina?
I mean, I think that, you know, I get oppositions on both sides because the risk is so huge, and especially with the young adult population. But you know, the benefits when it goes right outweighs the risk, and I think that when it doesn't go right, you know, the risks are not that much more than what they were before. So there's no reason to not take a chance.
That's a great point. Well, I think we have about 15 minutes. I'm not surprised to see a bunch of hands, and so hopefully the microphone genies will get around and hand you. Just go ahead, right up here in front, maybe.
Thank you for sharing your stories. The stories matter and they're important, so thank you so much. I am curious about the SOS program. I'm from the Eastern District of Michigan. Thankfully, we have an Alternatives to Prison program, a great one. 2 of our representatives from Pretrial and Probation are here. But I want to understand the mechanics of the SOS program. You don't have the U.S. attorney involved, and you don't have the. How do you have the authority to hold on to them for that long, and the U.S. attorney is not involved? I'm very interested.
So we do have, you know, designated program judges, and you know, we have a good relationship with all of the players. So even though they're not involved, I think usually, eventually, if the person under supervision pleads guilty, then the U.S. Attorney's Office, you know, doesn't like stress too much about the time in the program. It's only when they don't that there's an issue. But they do want the case to move along. But the judges in the program just do an order of excludable delay for 1,000 times. And
so you do have some cooperation by the U.S. attorney then?
Yeah, there is cooperation, but there's nothing like
they don't choose the people.
They don't choose the people, and there's no promise of anything. It's kind of like a gamble for all of us. So again, talking about risk, it's a gamble for the participant. You know, it's a gamble for us putting in all the work. It's a gamble for everybody. And so that's, again, it's another part of the criticism.
But it's not activated until after they plead guilty. Am I right about that?
No, I try to get them as soon, like, you know, I'm going to have them for 5 years. I need them day 1 or 2, you know. So that's why it's not a conviction-only program.
Sure, we want to go ahead over there or over here, whichever's easiest for you all to get to.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your inspiring presentations. My name is Judge Ginger Lerner Wren. I'm the pioneer of the first mental health court in the United States. And thank you. Thank you. And I went to GW, not the full term. But, so I wanted to just comment a little bit, and that court, by the way, is now 27 years old. It started in 1997. It gets no grants. We were the model for the American Mental Health Law Project, which funded mental health courts across the country back in 2000. And we diverted, over 23,000 people out of our jail part-time. But the point that I wanted to make, really, just to kind of, I think, broaden the conversation a little bit from a mental health vantage point, if you don't mind, is that with regard to the issue of risk and really gratification in terms of practicing law or being in the legal profession, either as an actor or as a judge or however, the data is not good. The research is not good in terms of lawyer well-being and the rates of suicide. And one thing that we've always said, problem-solving courts, alternative courts, however you want to, restorative justice, therapeutic justice, is so gratifying. I mean, you could hear it from what everybody's saying, no matter where you serve across the legal paradigm. And I think that particularly post-pandemic, everything that we can do for the legal profession, for new lawyers, for judges, in terms of promoting wellness, in terms of promoting mental health, I think is super important. And I think doing this work, nothing is more gratifying. Because don't forget, the law is a helping profession. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I think we have the mic over here. Very good. Thank you.
My name is Jonathan Ross. I'm the U.S. Attorney in Little Rock, Arkansas. My questions are for you, Mr. Capers, and you, Miss Adossa-Ali. First of all, I want to commend you, may I say, Amina.
Yeah.
Very encouraged by the story and the time that you put into Anderson's life to come about the result that occurred. So, in my little district, there's 94 U.S. Attorney's offices. We are one of the 25 small offices. We have about 29 AUSAs. We indict on the rankings, we're ranked 26th for how many cases that we file a year, but we're ranked number 2 in our caseload per AUSA. And the reason is that our district is the third most likely to release a defendant on pretrial supervised release. And so there's an interesting conundrum that happens when you are aggressive at allowing defendants to be released. They don't want to go to trial and get their case resolved. So our average case disposition, I've worked in 2 other districts in western Arkansas and eastern Texas, where the average case disposition time was about 8.6 months. Ours is 26.4 months to get a case resolved from cradle to grave. Because there's so many defendants released, because it takes so long to get the case resolved, the amount of contacts by the probation office per case is through the roof. And so when our federal defender approached me recently about trying to consider some of these different alternate sanctions programs, our chief probation officer has significant concerns because his staff is already spread so thin with the amount of supervision contacts they need to make to keep all of that going, that the idea of what you described, as amazing as it is in Anderson's life, took a lot of one-on-one time for you to be able to accomplish that. And so when you try to scale this out from a resource perspective, this to me is the number one problem in trying to implement more aggressive, alternatives to rewriting the sentence, is that our system simply does not have the capacity to allow probation officers to do what you were doing. Obviously, if we could turn the spigot on with more resources, that gets us there. But we all know that the court system, I think this year we were being told a 14% reduction in the cost of the courts. So not trying to have a detailed conversation. I might actually follow up with both of you and Mr. Capers after this conference. But I see it as a conundrum, not that I don't have the willingness to engage in these kind of programs in Eastern District of Arkansas, that the people who would have to implement the program say that they don't have the resources to do so. And there doesn't seem to be not only any help on the way, there seems to be less help on the way in the form of the 40% budget cuts. So any just preliminary remarks you might have about how I could encourage our U.S. probation officer to either reach out to you or to think differently about this problem and how I'm currently perceiving it.
I mean, I think that the one thing that our district does, both the probation and pretrial office, we are dealing with the same issue as well. But my office specifically, I am a dedicated officer to this program, so I have a much smaller caseload, and so I have the time to deal with that. Like, not every case is going to be a case that needs to be in a program or needs the intensive supervision. So, you know, because my caseload is a little smaller, then that means my colleagues have higher caseloads, and Chief Capers can kind of speak to that. That is a issue, but like I said, our programs are not huge. We're not moving like hundreds of people into these programs. So, you know, we're able to do it. And I mean, you know, it's a lot of work because I'm the only officer who works with this program. So I've had, you know, maybe, 35 people on my caseload. Right now, a little lower at 20. You know, that's like very, very, very small compared to the caseloads of my colleagues, but you're putting, you know, the resources where they're needed.
I would say, borrow what the dean said this morning, it's an incremental approach. And first of all. Second of all, it fits with our system's focus on evidence-based practices and focus the resources whether it be the high-risk people, and then that would be those people who are high needs. And so, like my colleague Chief Zero, who is Amina's chief, what we do is we deploy resources accordingly. And so, Amina being able to work this case principally in a lower caseload means other folks will be able to, will have to take on more of the load, but the flip side is also, Amina is very effective at what she does and is able to bring relatively good results to bear for the court. We have, on the post-conviction side, 4 different courts, reentry courts that we staff. We have taken to hiring officers who have backgrounds in everything from social work to have people who were mental health counselors who had their practices where they decided to come to probation. We deploy them strategically, which ultimately means that other officers have to pick up heavier caseloads. But it also forces us to take a look at how we're supervising people and doing the things that we can to ensure that we are supervising people proportionate to their risk.
Todd, I think you spoke about how time in drug court is much cheaper for the community than time in prison. Is that something that's emphasized to everybody? And not everybody sort of feels those savings. Certainly having the elected prosecutor talk about that may help the cause, but I'm just curious, the resource issue, and like hear from the judge as well, is obviously a state concern as well in so many ways. If you have some comments or thoughts about how to address those, maybe politically, if not always practically.
Well, I think it's pretty well known in eastern state circle that drug court is cheaper. And our legislature this year is expand drug courts in Illinois. So I don't know, where they'll end up on that, but the data are absolutely treatment is cheaper than incarceration.
I think we have time probably for one last question. I'm sure there's many more than that. I see somebody with a microphone right there. Go right ahead. Cap. You want to go to the other side, or we have...
Hi. I think a lot of this conversation shows to me that we need better interventions criminality, or really out in the community before we even get to into the system and keep people out of the system to begin with. But I think my question is, how do your programs deal with setbacks or failures by the people who are in them? I think some of the criticism for drug courts has been, one failure for some, one positive test, one, slide back into use or anything like that, and you're out. How do you deal with, the realities of substance use disorder and mental health, where it's not just one continuous, arrow up. It's it's a wave, it ebbs and flows. How do you deal with that in the program? And, keeping, having faith that people, hopefully can change, but, take some fits and starts.
I'm going to point to you, Richard. So.
Richard's going to answer on behalf of Albemarle Alternative District.
Well, I think viewing it as a participant with mental health issues or on the therapeutic docket, having the support staff and the support system in place that of Judge Quatrara, of all of the different officers we worked with at the courts, all the different therapists that we worked with, and our community service board, there was an understanding that this isn't just a trajectory up. No matter who you are, and I'm not speaking for every participant on the docket, but at least myself and all the participants that I witnessed during my time on the docket, we all had our good days, we all had our bad days. The judge or OAR or our community service board representatives, they never got on us to a point where it was discouraging us as participants to give up hope. Everybody always remained positive, always had the end goal as being kind of the number one mindset. Like, look, okay, we know where we need to be, we know how we want to get there, but we're not always going to get there the same way, and each individual is different. I think having, and I'm not on the docket anymore, so I don't have to toot his horn, but it speaks to the type of judge that Judge Quatrara is and how he presides over the court, that he's able to take someone like me and all these other individuals who had so many different mitigating circumstances, so many different issues that we all faced. Again, I mentioned it earlier, some of us had jobs and homes and families and great support systems. Others didn't have a cell phone, a job, a car, or a house. And all of those play into how you're going to succeed, whether you're going to relapse or whether you're going to take your proper medication or talk to your doctors, be truthful to your doctors, be truthful to the court representatives. And so I think as a participant, just recognizing, I think earlier one of the judges said, all participants are a little weary of us because they feel like, we're out to get them. And your first meeting in a therapeutic docket or an alternative sentencing program, you're thinking that, but you quickly realize every individual here is here to help you and benefit your life and help you return to society and be the best individual you can possibly be. We talked a lot about drug courts here today, but for a mental health component, I learned so many tools and so many resources to help me and my ability to manage being bipolar and what that looks like in today's society, and how to be a better father and how to be a better husband and how to be a better worker. That I wouldn't have had, and then I lived 10 years of my life knowing I was bipolar, but never was able to manage it properly. So again, having people that understand it's not a direct path, there's going to be ebbs and flows, there's going to be ups and downs, but not, get on you enough to understand what we have to do to correct course, but not just belittle you to a point where, okay, you're just going to give up hope. Because all of us know that, alternative is jail, and especially with mental health issues, an alternative sentence to jail is a sentence to death. And I don't say that lightly. If it wouldn't have been for the docket, if it wouldn't have been for the opportunity to go through something like that, I would have killed myself in prison. I wouldn't have had the ability or the resources to manage what I go through on a daily basis. That would have left my children without a father, my wife without a husband, and it would have set a terrible course for their life as well. So this docket didn't only save my life, it doesn't only save participants' lives, it saves their families' lives, it saves the community. And I can't speak high enough of it, and just the compassion that comes along with those who serve it.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts, and we're at time, so just please join me in thanking all of our participants and what was a wonderful panel. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.